A peasant girl saw Pope Francis descending from heaven, triggering inexplicable events in her Sicilian village. During the worst drought in decades, olive trees miraculously bloom and dry springs begin to flow again. Amidst skepticism and devotion, her life is transformed as she faces judgment from the community and religious authorities. A story of faith, doubt, and redemption that questions the boundaries between miracle and nature. Prepare for a spiritual journey that will touch your heart. Subscribe, leave your like and comment where you are watching from. The sun beat down mercilessly on the parched fields of Oakhaven, a small Sicilian village where the centuries-old olive trees, once green and abundant, now bowed withered under the relentlessly blue sky. Mary Rose Smith, with her 28 years, lived between the dust and the faith of those lands, was kneeling among the trees, her calloused fingers picking the few fruits that had resisted the worst drought in half a century. Her red scarf, an heirloom from her grandmother, protected her head as she murmured prayers learned at her mother's knee, just as she had done every day for the past 6 months without rain. It was in that moment of silent devotion that the extraordinary broke through Mary Rose's routine. The sky, previously a painful blue, opened up into a swirl of golden clouds. And there, descending an array of light so bright it made her eyes burn, was he, Pope Francis, not as the elderly man from the televisions in the square, but as a radiant presence, his hands outstretched in blessing over the dying fields. Time froze in that instant. The cicadas silenced their incessant song. The wind, which had not visited Oakhaven for weeks, blew gently, bringing a scent of incense and flowers that did not grow in that region. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the vision dissipated, leaving Mary Rose prostrate among the olive trees, her heart pounding in her chest like the church bells on Sunday. "Holy Father," she whispered, tears mixing with the sweat on her face, grimy from work. "Why me? What does it mean? And you who have seen the inexplicable dance before your eyes only to disappear, leaving you in doubt about the reality of what you witnessed, perhaps understand the torment that fell upon the heart of the young peasant girl. Returning home that evening was like walking through a dream. The same stone streets, the same smell of bread from old Salvatore's bakery, the same children running in the square, everything the same, when in reality, the whole world had changed. Mary Rose now carried a secret too heavy for her shoulders, accustomed to physical burdens, not spiritual ones. Who should she tell? Who would believe her? In the small stone house she shared with her elderly parents, Mary Rose served the thin vegetable soup made from withered vegetables, the best the parched earth could offer, while her father, Anthony Smith, grumbled about the lost fields, and her mother, Lucy, lit a candle for St. Clair, praying for the miracle of rain. Pope Francis appeared to me today among the old olive trees. The words escaped her, almost unintentionally, falling into the silence of the kitchen like stones into a dry well. Lucy's cutlery froze in midair. Anthony choked on his hard bread. "The heat got to her head, daughter," her father finally said, eyes lowered to his plate. "Drink more water tomorrow." "No, Father. I saw him descend from heaven in a ray of light, as real as I'm seeing you." "Mercy. Anthony, she's delirious." Lucy made the sign of the cross 3 times in a row. "First thing tomorrow you'll see Father Gabriel." But Mary Rose knew, with that certainty that women of the land carry, a wisdom that comes from the earth and high, the sky, that she was not delirious. That night, lying in her narrow bed under the wooden crucifix, she faced her first and perhaps deepest dilemma. Was she worthy of such a vision? Why her, a simple peasant girl, when in church there were ladies of unshakable faith who spent hours on their knees on the cold marble? The night passed in restless vigil, and when the first light of morning filtered through the small window, Mary Rose had reached a decision. She would only tell Father Gabriel. He would know what to do. The parish priest of Oakhaven was a short, stout man with a bald head that reflected the light of the altar candles, and small eyes that always seemed to be calculating something. When Mary Rose finished her account, in the gloom of the confessional that smelled of old wood and ancient sins, the silence that followed was heavier than all the lost harvest of Sicily. "My daughter," he finally began, his voice controlled, like someone afraid of startling a wild animal. "Do you know how many people have come to me with visions and dreams since this drought began? The human mind, in its desperation for answers, can play tricks on us. It wasn't a trick, Father. I saw him. I smelled his incense. The wind changed." Mary rose, his tone was now firmer, like when he preached against the dangers of the carnival. "You are a good Catholic. You always have been. But think about what you are. Seeing the Holy Father descending from the heavens like an angel," she completed without backing down. "These are serious matters. The Church has protocols for claims of apparitions, rigorous investigations. Do you want to bring this scrutiny to Oakhaven, to your family?" That question, loaded with veiled warning, planted the first seed of doubt. Not about what she had seen, of that she was absolutely certain, but about the wisdom of sharing it. Leaving the church under the disapproving gaze of the stone saint in the niche, Mary Rose felt the weight of the secret doubling her shoulders, already bent by the labor of the fields. But in a small village like Oakhaven, where walls have ears and the winds carry whispers, secrets rarely remain buried for long. The next morning, when Mary Rose went to the market to buy bread, she felt the eyes following her, heard the murmurs that ceased at her approach. "Is it true that you saw the Pope?" Sophia, the young woman who sold cheeses and always knew everything, before everyone else asked directly. Her eyes shone with the same hungry curiosity that Mary Rose saw at Masses, when the priest spoke of ancient miracles. "Who told you that?" "Everyone is talking. They say you saw him descend from heaven in the old olive grove and that now the trees are different." "Different? How so?" Mary Rose's heart quickened. "Go see for yourself." Sophia shrugged, but her eyes betrayed excitement. Leaving, her shopping basket half full, Mary Rose ran to the olive grove. Even from a distance, she noticed that something was different. The air seemed lighter, carrying a freshness long absent. And the trees. Oh, the trees. The old olive trees surrounding the exact spot where she had knelt now displayed a vibrant green, and could it be possible? Flower buds were blooming among the leaves. Something unthinkable at that time of year, especially in the midst of a drought. Mary Rose fell on her knees, this time not from exhaustion or devotion, but from awe. She touched a delicate flower, felt its impossible texture under her calloused fingers. It wasn't a delusion caused by the sun. It was real as the vision of the previous day. "Holy miracle," a voice murmured behind her. Turning, Mary Rose saw Giuseppe, the oldest of the farmers, whose face, wrinkled like tree bark, had witnessed more droughts and storms than anyone else in Oakhaven. His teary eyes stared at the trees with reverent astonishment. 50 years cultivating this land, his voice trembled, and never, not even in the best years of rain, have I seen olive trees flowering out of season. By nightfall, a small crowd had gathered in the olive grove. Whispers ran like a newborn stream. Miracle. The peasant girl saw the Pope. The message, flowers in the drought. Not everyone believed, of course. In every village divided by a miracle, there are those who see the hand of God, and those who look for tricks of light and self-deception. Victor, the owner of the bar who served more wine than water even in times of scarcity, did not hide his skepticism. "Convenient, isn't it?" he said to the men gathered around the stained wooden tables. Old Anthony's daughter, whose land is drier than the others, suddenly has a vision and, look at that, her olive trees bloom. "You don't know Mary Rose," defended Mark, the young teacher who had returned to the village after studying in Chicago. "She's the last person to make up stories to get attention. Everyone changes when hunger strikes." Victor shrugged. "Besides, have you seen the movement that's starting? The tourists will come next, and who profits from tourists? The poison of suspicion, once spilled, contaminates even the purest hearts." In the following days, as news of the miraculous olive grove spread beyond the borders of Oakhaven, Mary Rose felt a pain that no physical labor had ever caused her. The suspicious gaze of neighbors she had known forever, the loneliness of someone who carries a truth that few accept. Meanwhile, the olive trees continued to flower, now laden with small fruits that grew at an impossible pace. And it wasn't just the trees. The vegetation around the site of the apparition seemed revitalized, as if an oasis was forming in the midst of the desert of the drought. People from neighboring villages began to arrive, first a few, then in organized groups, bringing bottles to collect water from a small spring that had inexplicably begun to flow near the sacred place. "It's blessed water," some said, drinking it avidly. "It's just an underground water table that emerged by coincidence," others retorted. The church, authorities could no longer ignore the events. 3 weeks after Mary Rose's vision, an envoy from the bishopric in Chicago arrived in Oak Haven. Monsignor Ferranti was a tall, thin man with small glasses and a permanently skeptical expression, as befits someone whose job is to unmask false apparitions. "The church has a lot of experience with supernatural claims," he explained to Father Gabriel as they watched the pilgrims from afar. "Most unfortunately are nothing more than hallucinations, mass suggestion, or deliberate frauds." The way he pronounced deliberate frauds made the parish priest's blood run cold. What a disaster it would be for Oak Haven if Mary Rose's vision were exposed as a hoax. The religious tourism that was flourishing would be only temporary, but the shame would remain for generations. The interrogation to which Mary Rose was subjected took place in the sacristy of the church, a small room with dark wood furniture, where the smell of centuries of incense impregnated even the stone walls. For 3 hours, Monsignor Ferranti asked the same questions in different ways, looking for contradictions, testing her faith and knowledge of doctrine. "And the Holy Father said anything?" he asked for the 3rd time. "Not with words, Monsignor. It was more a feeling, a knowledge that entered me without passing through my ears." "And what was this wordless message?" Mary Rose hesitated. This was the hardest part to explain, the one that made her most vulnerable to disbelief. That difficult times were coming, that we should prepare not with fear but with hope. That unity would save not only Oak Haven, but serve as an example. "Quite convenient," the Monsignor murmured, making notes. "And before this vision, did you have any special interest in the Holy Father? Did you follow his speeches, perhaps?" "Like everyone here, Monsignor, at Masses, Father Gabriel often tells us about the Pope's words." "And do you have the habit of drawing or writing about your spiritual experiences?" The question caught Mary Rose by surprise. How did he know about the notebook? No one knew about the notebook except, "My mother showed you my drawings, it wasn't a question. Your mother is worried about you. The drawings date back 3 months before the supposed apparition. Explain that." The revelation was like a stab wound. Her secret notebook, where since she was young she had recorded dreams and impressions in simple strokes, had been searched, judged, and was now being used against her. And by her own mother. "They are just dreams, Monsignor. Since I was a child, I've had vivid dreams, sometimes with saints, sometimes with angels. My grandmother said it was a gift, spiritual. A gift, spiritual, or a fertile imagination, that now confuses reality with fantasy." When she was finally released, Mary Rose felt emptied, like the ancient broken amphorae they sometimes found buried in the fields when plowing. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with that golden pink that only Sicilian afternoons know. A small group of people waited in the distance, some curious, others pilgrims, and among them, her parents. Her mother's face was marked by tears, but it was her father's eyes that hit her like a thrown stone. There was something there. Shame, fear, that she had never seen before. "Daughter," he called, his voice too low for the strong man he had always been. "We need to talk." That night, at the same table where they had shared thousands of simple meals, Anthony Smith told his story. One he had kept for decades, buried under layers of silence as dense as the earth he cultivated. "I also had a vision 40 years ago," he revealed, the words coming out hesitant as someone forgetting how to speak. "During another drought, almost as terrible as this one, I saw Our Lady among the wheat fields asking us to dig a well in a specific spot. I told the parish priest at the time. He laughed. I told my friends. They laughed even more. For weeks, I insisted until they started calling me Anthony the Lunatic. Mary Rose was barely breathing, soaking up every word like thirsty earth soaking up the first drops of rain. I never forgave myself for my cowardice, for not defending what I knew to be true. And now, when my own daughter is going through the same, I handed your notebook to the Monsignor, thinking to protect you from the shame I felt. I did exactly the opposite of what I should have. That confession, wrenched from the depths of a heart long silenced, was the first true miracle Mary Rose witnessed, greater than olive trees flowering out of season, more significant than fountains springing from dry land. It was the miracle of forgiveness and truth, of shared fragility that unites more strongly than perfection ever could. 3 days later, Mary Rose knelt again in the olive grove, now transformed by small, tents of pilgrims and colored ribbons tied to the branches, vows and requests left by visitors. The Monsignor had left for Chicago, taking with him a detailed report and the notebook of drawings, promising an official response soon. Life in Oakhaven, however, no longer waited for ecclesiastical approvals. A silent transformation was occurring, as subtle as the maturation of the fruits on the revitalized trees. Merchants who previously competed for the same scarce customers now organized themselves to serve the visitors. Old rivals worked side by side, restoring abandoned houses for lodging, reviving craft traditions forgotten for generations. The fountain that had sprung up inexplicably was no longer just a collection point for miraculous water, but the center of a community irrigation system that, inspired by ancient Roman techniques documented in the church archives, now extended beyond the olive grove. It was during the traditional harvest celebration, when the entire village gathered to offer the first fruits in gratitude, that Mary Rose had her second vision. This time she was not alone. Hundreds of people witnessed when, kneeling before the improvised altar under the olive trees, she suddenly raised her eyes to the sky, her face illuminated as if reflecting a light invisible to others. "United, we will resist," she whispered, her voice strangely altered. "Not just the dryness of the earth, but the dryness of hearts. Prepare for times of trial, not with fear, but with hope. What you plant today, generations will harvest tomorrow." And then, as a sign that even the most skeptical could not ignore, the first drops of rain in 6 months fell upon the astonished congregation. Not a violent storm, but a gentle drizzle that kissed the earth with the delicacy of a mother touching the face of her long-absent child. People fell on their knees, faces raised to receive that liquid blessing, laughter and tears mixing with the rain. Father Gabriel, who until then had maintained a prudent distance from the miraculous claims, now wept openly, his trembling hands raised in praise. "Miracle," some shouted. "A meteorological coincidence," others insisted. And you who have felt the touch of rain after a long drought, know that regardless of the explanation, there is something sacred in that moment, a rebirth that transcends scientific or religious nomenclature. The following weeks brought both validations and new challenges to Mary Rose. A group of geologists sent by the university in Chicago confirmed that a rare tectonic movement had created fissures in the subsoil, allowing underground thermal waters, previously blocked, to reach the surface near the apparition site. A perfectly explainable natural phenomenon, they concluded, without noticing the irony that their scientific explanation did nothing to diminish the miraculous aspect for those who saw God working through the very natural laws he established. At the same time, Mary Rose began to notice strange spots on her hands, reddish marks that formed a vaguely cruciform pattern. The village doctor diagnosed a rare allergy to olive tree resins, exacerbated by constant contact during the harvest. But for the faithful, they were sacred stigmata, physical signs of divine election. This duality of explanations, the miraculous coexisting with the mundane, the divine intertwined with the natural, reflected the conflict within Mary Rose herself. Was she truly a chosen messenger, or just an ordinary peasant woman who had witnessed an extraordinary set of coincidences? The answer began to take shape when Jane, a 5-year-old child from a neighboring village, was brought to her. The girl, suffered from a persistent fever that no doctor had been able to explain. Desperate, the mother had brought her daughter to drink from the miraculous source and received the blessing of the peasant saint, as some now called Mary Rose. "I am not a saint," she protested, uncomfortable with the veneration. "I am just a woman who saw something extraordinary." Even so, she led the feverish child to the source. As she watched the girl drink eagerly the fresh water, Mary Rose felt an inexplicable impulse. She plunged her hands, those same marked hands that so perplexed doctors and faithful, into the crystal-clear water, and then gently touched the child's burning forehead. The transformation was immediate. The feverish flush dissipated like mist under the sun. The cloudy eyes cleared, and a smile lit up the face previously contracted in pain. The mother fell on her knees, hugging her daughter and crying in a mixture of relief and awe. The news of the miraculous healing spread like wildfire, attracting the attention of national journalists who invaded Oakhaven with cameras and recorders, eager to capture the phenomenon for their audiences hungry for wonders in an increasingly disillusioned world. Thus, Mary Rose's past came to light, not as a scandal, but as a piece that completed the puzzle of her extraordinary journey. Journalists discovered that, before dedicating herself fully to life in the fields, she had been a brilliant student, with potential for an academic career. She had abandoned everything after a devastating earthquake that hit the region, choosing to stay to help with reconstruction when many of her generation left in search of opportunities in the big cities. "I always knew my place was here," she explained simply when questioned about the choice, even without knowing why. The growing attention also brought new scientific discoveries. A team of researchers, analyzing soil samples from around the source, identified rare medicinal properties in the local clays. Compounds that, diluted in the water, could indeed explain some of the reported healings. This revelation caused Mary Rose's greatest crisis of faith. On an afternoon of particular torment, she sought refuge in the ancient Hermit's Cave, a sacred place nestled in the hills above Oakhaven, where for centuries men and women had retreated for contemplation and prayer. "What am I, Lord?" she asked the stone walls that had witnessed so many other spiritual crises over the centuries. "A messenger or a blind instrument of chance? Am I bringing true hope or spreading illusions?" For 7 days and 7 nights, Mary Rose remained in the cave, undergoing an ordeal similar to that of Jesus in the desert. She drank only the water that dripped from the rocks and ate the wild fruits that grew at the entrance. Time in that place suspended between heaven and earth seemed to follow another logic, stretching and contracting like bread under the experienced hands of a baker. On the 7th night, exploring the depths of the cave illuminated only by an almost consumed candle, Mary Rose made an extraordinary discovery. In a narrow crevice in the rock, she found a package wrapped in ancient leathers and protected by beeswax. Inside, documents yellowed by time revealed a story that made her heart race. Exactly a century before, another young woman from Oakhaven, Agnes Jones, had reported a similar vision in the same olive grove. The crucial difference: Agnes had been silenced by the authorities, her accounts archived and eventually forgotten, her message of renewal and preparation for difficult times buried along with her in a nameless grave. "It was not coincidence," murmured Mary Rose, pieces fitting together in her spirit like a divine mosaic. It was continuity, a message that needed to be delivered, even 100 years late. When she returned to the village after her retreat, she found Oakhaven transformed, but not in the way she expected. The small town now bustled with commercial activity. Stalls sold bottled miraculous water, images of her printed on t-shirts and medals, and even sacred earth from the olive grove in small bags at exorbitant prices. A tourist bus parked in the square unloaded visitors with cameras and open wallets. The commercialization of her vision hit Mary Rose like a slap. This was not the purpose of the message she had received, that Agnes had received before her. The revelation had not been granted to create a new source of income, but to awaken something deeper. The dormant capacity of a community to resurrect ancestral traditions of cooperation and sustainability that would allow its survival in increasingly challenging times. During the Sunday Mass, while Father Gabriel preached about the mysteries of faith, Mary Rose felt that same inner certainty that had accompanied her since the first vision. She stood up from her pew, walked to the altar, and in a gesture that shocked the congregation, asked to speak. "What we saw here was not about me," she declared, her voice firm, resonating in the ancient stone walls. "It's not about bottled miraculous water or sacred earth sold to tourists. The message was always about us, as a community, rediscovering what our ancestors always knew, that united, we can face any adversity, that the knowledge preserved for generations in our dusty archives and in the memories of our elders is more valuable than all the money the tourists can bring." The church fell silent. Some newly prosperous merchants shifted uncomfortably in the pews. I found documents in the hermit's cave that prove I was not the first to receive this message. A century ago, another woman had the same vision, in the same place. She was silenced. If we allow easy profit and commercial exploitation to dominate our response now, we will be silencing this message again, perhaps for the last time. Her words fell like stones into still water, creating ripples that expanded far beyond that small church. In the following months, as the olive trees continued to flower inexplicably out of season, and the fountains to gush, the Oakhaven community was transformed in ways that no scientist or theologian could easily measure. The ancient Roman irrigation system, rediscovered in the documents preserved in the church, was expanded. Sustainable agricultural practices, abandoned in favor of modern methods that had shown their fragility during the drought, were resumed. Stories and knowledge of the elders, previously considered outdated superstitions, were now recorded and studied with new reverence. The most extraordinary moment occurred during the traditional religious festival that marked the anniversary of the first vision. While Mary Rose led the prayers at the olive grove, now transformed into a lush garden despite the drought that still afflicted neighboring regions, a rare atmospheric phenomenon left everyone breathless. A triple solar halo illuminated the procession, casting a golden glow over the faithful gathered. Meteorologists explained the phenomenon as light refraction in atmospheric ice crystals, a rare event, but completely natural. For the inhabitants of Oakhaven, however, it was another confirmation that their collective journey was being watched and blessed. And then, exactly 1 year after the first vision, the unexpected occurred. During the Thanksgiving for the abundant harvest celebration, a miracle in itself considering the weather conditions that persisted throughout the region, a buzz ran through the crowd gathered in the olive grove. Official cars were approaching on the dusty road. "It is him," someone shouted. "Pope Francis himself." And it truly was. In an unannounced visit during his passage through Sicily, the Holy Father had come personally to Oakhaven. His car stopped by the olive grove, and he walked slowly among the fruit-laden trees, pausing occasionally to touch the gnarled trunks with a contemplative expression. The crowd parted in reverent silence when he approached Mary Rose. Their eyes met, his wise and gentle, hers teary with emotion. He took her marked hands in his, examining with curiosity the reddish spots that had been so much discussed. "Monsignor Ferrante told me about you," he said simply, "and about what happened here." Mary Rose could not speak, her heart beating like a drum in her chest. "I did not come to confirm nor deny the miraculous character of the events," the Pope continued, in a low voice that only she and those closest could hear. "That belongs to church processes that take time and discernment. I came to recognize how faith can transform a community. I saw from the road the irrigation systems that you built together, based on ancient knowledge. I saw houses being restored by collective hands. I saw people who could have become victims of their own misfortune transforming themselves into an example of renewal and hope." Turning to the crowd, Pope Francis then spoke in a louder voice. "The greatest miracle is not in the trees that flower out of season, nor in the water that springs from dry stones. The greatest miracle is in the human heart that opens to another, in the hand that extends to help, in the ancient wisdom that is renewed to face modern challenges. This is the true miracle I see today in Oakhaven." The Pope's words, neither confirming nor denying Mary Rose's vision, but validating its deepest fruits finally brought her the peace she sought. It no longer mattered if what she had seen was a supernatural manifestation or a phenomenon that science would one day explain completely. What mattered were the seeds planted, the rebirth of a community that had learned to look simultaneously to its ancestral past and to an uncertain future with the same courage and hope. In the weeks that followed the papal visit, Mary Rose established a foundation dedicated to preserving the ancestral agricultural traditions and sustainability knowledge that had allowed the Oakhaven community to thrive for centuries before modern farming techniques. With the support of universities and environmental organizations, the small Sicilian village began to receive a new type of visitor. Not pilgrims seeking miracles, but scholars and farmers interested in rediscovering sustainable practices to face a changing world. The spots on her hands eventually disappeared, as did the debates about their divine or allergic origin. The olive trees continued to flower, although less spectacularly than in the first year. The source continued to gush, feeding not just the community irrigation system, but also serving as a constant reminder that sometimes the extraordinary emerges in times of greatest need. And Mary Rose, the peasant woman who had once doubted her own worth to receive a divine message, now walked with the serene confidence of someone who had found her purpose, not as a visionary or a saint, roles she had always rejected, but as a guardian of ancient wisdom and a bridge between forgotten traditions and future needs. On clear nights when the Sicilian sky was filled with stars so bright they seemed within reach, she still visited the olive grove. She sat under the centuries-old trees, their roots now nourished by abundant water, and contemplated the extraordinary journey that had transformed not just her life, but an entire community. The miracle was never the vision, she would say to the young people who came to listen to her stories. The miracle was the awakening, the recognition that we carry in our hands, in our shared memories, in our ancient dusty books, the seeds for our own salvation. And you, who have accompanied this story this far, perhaps wonder if Mary Rose really saw Pope Francis descend from the heavens that scorching afternoon, or if it was just an optical phenomenon created by the merciless sun on a mind exhausted by worry. Perhaps you question whether the olive trees flowered by divine intervention or by some rare alignment of environmental conditions not yet completely understood by science. But these questions, while natural, are perhaps not the most important. What truly matters, the real heart of this story, is the transformation that followed, the awakening of a community to its own dormant capabilities, the rediscovery of ancestral wisdoms when most needed, the union of ordinary people creating something extraordinary from despair. Because in the end, the greatest miracles are not those that defy the laws of nature, but those that defy the limits of the human heart, expanding our capacity for love, hope, and renewal exactly when they seem most impossible. And these miracles, perhaps the only ones that truly matter, are within reach of all of us, even without celestial visions or divine interventions, awaiting only our own awakening.